Okay, so yes. So this week, week 5, we are moving on with our topics. We're moving into chapter 4 and chapter 5. We're not going to do all of chapter 5. I don't have, it's only like maybe 11 pages or so from chapter 5 that we're going to focus on. And I will post that in Blackboard, what the reading assignment is for chapter 5. But we're going to talk about the main topics of chapter 4 are social structure, society in general, and the components of society. So we've studied so far in chapter 1. We've learned about the sociological imagination and the sociological perspectives, right? Those should ring a bell to you when I say those words. If they don't, go back and look at them again. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 are related. They are tied to each other because in sociology we study society and the culture that people share within that population. Okay? And also, how do we learn that culture? We learn through the socialization process, and all of that was in those videos from in the week 4 folder that y'all should have watched by now or in the process of completing, because the first test is due when? Tomorrow at 9 p.m. Yeah, for y'all and for my online students and everybody. Would you say you have a question? Ethnocentrism is a keyword from yes, ethnocentrism, right. Ethnocentrism has to do with culture, but it's how we judge, we make judgments. Exactly, good. The other one is cultural relativism, and it's kind of like, it's not really the opposite of ethnocentrism, but it's kind of like a cure for it, a step towards not doing it. Okay, so who else has a question? Anybody?
I sent you an email about how you stated you can do a couple of the answers on the quiz.
Oh yeah, a couple people did that, and I don't know why. Are you not able to do it?
No,
Save answers?
I did like 2 or 3 times, and I had to start all over from the beginning.
Because
So
just this morning, because I checked it last week, I've gotten 3 emails from people. So yeah, so you're one of 3 emails or text messages that I got that says it won't let you save the answers and go back in. I have no idea why it won't let you do that, because the settings indicate that it should.
Yeah.
So my only guess is, this is what I'm told time and time again whenever I contact Blackboard support, because y'all have a Blackboard support email address, right? If you ever have any issues, I have the same email address, so I can email them and ask them my issues. And Blackboard support tells me over and over again, if you use Internet Explorer, or there's one other one, Internet Explorer or some other... I think you're supposed to use Chrome. You're supposed to use Chrome.
That's what I was using, because I have a Chrome.
Okay, well then that shoots that theory out. Because I know that Blackboard will not work properly with some of its functions. It won't work properly with Internet Explorer, and maybe the other one is Firefox that it doesn't like. But you can easily look that up. But anyway, so before we do the second multiple choice test, which is going to be around the 10-week mark maybe, 10 weeks in the semester. Before we do that next one, I'm going to get the Blackboard people to go over my settings with me and see if there's something that prevented some folks from saving their answers. I don't know. Other than the web browser thing. Did y'all have... Yes, ma'am.
Why isn't it showing us our score?
Because I do have that set to not... Oh, it does show you your score. It shows you your score under My Grades, but it won't show you your... It won't show you the results. Right, it won't show you the results because there's the same set of questions. So, if you want to take it again, you'll have to go through the questions again. It's like a learning experience that I want the test to be. So it shows you the score. So you can look to see, did you make a 65 or a 95 or anything in between, and decide whether you want to keep that score, but it's not going to show you which questions. Yeah, because you need to go back through and consider all of them again. If you go to My Grades, it'll show you your score. Mm-hmm. It'll show you your score.
But it'll replace it?
It will replace it when you submit it again. I will be able to see each of the grades that you got. But, yes.
Okay.
Is that your question? Yes, I'm going to take the highest grade. Yeah. Yes. But yeah, I mean, the system is going to take the most recent one that you submitted and show it to you. But I'm going to be able to see all of them. Okay? Other questions about the test? Okay, if you haven't watched the videos yet, you know who you are, and you're going to lose a lot of sleep, but with hearing my voice say, have you watched your videos yet?
Mm-hmm.
Spooky, calm voice. Have you watched your videos yet? So you know who you are, and you're going to hear me at night telling you to do that. So, okay. So anyway, let's, any other questions about last week being gone? Any tests, anything like that? Okay, so let's go. I have 2 markers, so let's hope they're good markers, because today we have to take some notes. We're starting on chapter 4 that has to do with society and social structure. There is a chart on some page at the beginning of chapter 4. I want to say like page 97 or something like that, that we are going to reproduce on the board, and it is on page 98. There is a little flow chart kind of thing that we're gonna I'm not gonna copy it exactly like that, but we're gonna use that concept. We're gonna use that as a concept map to take notes from. Okay, so in general, yeah. So you can look at this on page 98, and let me reproduce it here. I make a few changes to this. I'm sure you're not surprised that I make just a couple of changes to the way the textbook author has drawn this and has explained it. So the textbook author has the word society up at the top. We're going to, yes, society can be up at the top. Society is about the group of people that lives in a certain geographic area and has a government that, places the rules, and they follow general norms and values and culture in common. But I want to zoom out from that, and we're going to put the word social structure as the heading, the heading for this concept map. So we're going to say social structure. Social structure. This is a term, a concept that we have talked about a lot already. We talked about social structure. This is a macro scale thing. It's at the society level. Okay, so that's the major concept of what we're going to kind of take apart and learn about in chapter 4. Culture is part of social structure. People and individual micro-scale interaction is part of social structure. But social structure is a complex framework of all kinds of things that work together. So you might remember back, I don't remember what lesson it was, but you might remember back in the first couple of weeks we talked about, think about society as like a matrix full of a program or something that we are all a part of. So that's what we're talking about here. So social structure is the process, it's the rules, it's the norms, it's the components of culture we learned about last week that you inherited at birth. You were born into a society that has a language, it has norms, it has values, it has history, and your life experience to a great extent is shaped by the fact that you were born into the culture that you were born into, with the history, with the norms, with the values, with the patriarchy, with the social facts, etc., that we got at birth. We inherited it at birth. Okay? So every society has a social structure. Every society has these same components, but the norms, the values, the culture, the language, the symbols, the traditions, all of those things are going to be different from one place to the next. But social structure is the same everywhere. Do y'all follow that? I feel like I'm talking real fast. Yeah, I need to slow down. Okay, so social structure. This is like the center instead of just the word society, like this textbook author puts on page 98. Another difference I'm going to make intentionally on the way that she drew this picture is she's got like 3 lines coming out of this central box. I'm going to draw one main line coming out of the central box, with 3 different branches or arms or whatever you want to call it coming off of that one central line. It's a difference from the way the textbook author has presented it to you. Because this is essentially, this arm is three components of social structure. It's a complex framework of three components of things that bring about daily life, bring about life and society from one generation to the next. Social structure. So, I'm drawing this with one line coming out of this, and these things, all three of these things connected to that one line, because these things don't exist in bubbles. I mean, we're going to kind of draw them in their own little boxes, but they don't just exist in bubbles without touching each other. Okay, they're all connected. You with me? Don't use cell phones right now unless you're looking up if I misspelled a word or something and you want to help me spell better. Okay, so three components of social structure. You will have heard some of these words before. One of them is called a social institution. That's one of the components. We'll get the definition for it in just a second. But for now, we need to know that social institutions exist on the macro level in a society. Macro scale stuff that we're talking about here. Also, in the middle, we've got something called statuses and roles. It's two different things, but they're always connected. You can't have one without the other. So even though it's two different things, we're going to get two different definitions. We're going to get explanations of these things. They're always connected to each other. And I'm putting this one in the middle because these have elements of macro and micro. Elements of macro and micro scale components in statuses and roles. We will, of course, explain that thoroughly when we get to that. And the last one on our list of three components of social structure are groups, social groups. There's two or three different kinds of groups that we will talk about, but these social groups are predominantly microscale, predominantly, mostly. As a matter of fact, you can put that word on there. It's mostly microscale stuff that we're going to examine when we look at the social groups in this chapter. So this is chapter 4 and chapter 5 together, because a lot of our group information that we're going to talk about and take notes on, a lot of that comes from chapter 5, and most of the statuses and roles information comes from chapter 4. And social institutions, this is a term that you have had in your reading for the first 3 chapters, and now chapter 4 and chapter 5 is going to happen again, and chapter 6. So these macro level components of social structure, you've read about them a lot, and I think I'm sure I've given you the definition of them, at least, spoken it to you, maybe not written it on the board. So we'll do that now. So we're to that now. So for the next 2 or 3, today included, for the next 2 class periods at least, we're going to be taking apart this chart and really examining we will be learning, of course, what these things are, how to differentiate among these things. But honestly, the biggest part of this is like right here, this intersection where all of these things like touch each other and come together and form social life, form macro and micro level components of society that kind of make the world go round. Okay? Questions? Okay, so let me use this part of the board over here. Actually, will somebody take their phone really quick before I change or erase any of this and take a good, you can stand up if my computer's in the way, but take a good picture of this, please, for my online students. Colleen, I'm listening to you. You want a picture, so you're going to get it. So, and then y'all just, somebody just get a full, like a straight-on picture and text it to me. And then I'll need that over here. So Amy has been doing it for me, but she's out today. So I'll do that over here with what we're about to write. But y'all stop me if I start to erase it, okay? Before somebody take a picture. Actually, I think the angle that I have for my camera today is on this part of the board. So if everybody can see this, okay, I'll just erase it now, and we'll keep using the same part of the board. Sound good? Okay. All right, so we are going to start today with social institutions. There should be an S on that now that y'all have already taken a picture of the board. I just realized that there really should be an S on that because there are multiple social institutions, but we will talk about that right now. Okay, so let me erase and use the same spot on the board. Okay, so however you want to organize this in your notes, this is like we're taking that one section of social institutions on the macro scale and we're like zooming in on it, right? So we need a big section in our notes that's only going to be about that one arm from that picture, okay? So here's the social institutions arm. Social institutions. Let's get a working definition. I mean, I might not write a complete sentence here, but we're going to get some key words that explain this vocabulary term for us. Okay? So we already know that social institutions are they macro or are they micro?
Macro.
They're macro. We already know that they are macro. So social institutions are macro level. Does that mean that they affect all of us or only just a few different categories of people in society? They affect everybody in a population. Yes. So social institutions are macro level because they affect everyone in a population. They affect everyone in a population. I think I heard somebody say, how do they affect everyone in the population? Right? How? How might this happen, Miss Terrell? Okay, so how does this happen? It's because of norms. It's because of customs. It's because of traditions. Those words that come from the definition of culture that we learned about when I was gone last week. So norms, customs, and traditions that exist on the macro scale that ensure the needs of the population are taken care of. Keep on spelling that word wrong. I think in the reading in chapter 4, the sentence that the textbook author has says something like, social institutions are the set of rules that are in place in a society to take care of things, to make sure that the needs are met. The phrase set of rules is popping out at me. And that's a true statement. Norms are rules after all, right? Norms are the expected behaviors that members of a population are going to have, right? Like right now, all of you are following expected behaviors that you have learned in kindergarten about this formal, or you started learning them in kindergarten, about this formal part of our socialization process where you're supposed to come into class and be good boys and girls, right? And raise your hand and those kinds of things that you've learned since kindergarten. right? Never in all of my years of teaching higher education have I ever had to come into class on the very first day and tell somebody, wait a minute, this table right here, this is my table, y'all can't sit here, that's a table for students. Why have I never had to say that to somebody? You walk into the classroom, you interpret the way the classroom is designed, and it's just kind of like that decision is made for you, right? You don't even have to consider sitting here because you've got norms that have guided you since then. But norms exist on the macro level. Hint, hint. Norms exist on the macro level. You and I live them out in our microscale lives, right? Whether we follow them or whether we go against them, we're still reacting to the macro scale social norms. They are there. Whether we follow them or not on the micro scale is a different story. Okay? So norms exist on the macro scale, and social institutions are the norms that are in place to make sure that the needs of a population are taken care of. For instance, an example of a social institution that I think I talked about in the socialization videos that are in the week 4 folder is the education system. The education system is an example of a social institution. Every society has social institutions, but the list of social institutions that you would put for examples are not all going to be the same. In other words, not every culture has norms that require a certain mandatory level of education for its people. In the United States, do we have norms that the entire population, we want everybody in the entire population to have a pretty much a standard set of knowledge and skills? Yeah, we do. Now, what is that bare minimum norm? High school diploma. A high school diploma is the bare minimum norm. That's the tradition, that's the custom we want to follow, that's the set of rules that our society has in place. And so the education system is the organized method. It's the organized set of systematically transmitting that knowledge to you from K through 12. Okay? So this is an example of a social institution. The need, if I tell you, for instance, that education system is a social institution, what need does that fill? What would you say based on what we just talked about? Well, we just said that in our society, in our social structure, do we have norms for the bare minimum amount of knowledge that people are supposed to have? We have norms for that. Well, how's that supposed to happen? Can parents give you all of the knowledge that you need for bare minimum high school? No. Some people said that emphatically. No, our parents cannot do that. Some parents might be able to, but not everybody, right? So because parents can't do it, that's not the norm that your parent does it. What's the norm? The education, yeah, we have people, it becomes a job. It becomes a job that some people have to fulfill so that everyone in the population can meet that minimum standard that our norm says we are supposed to have. Does that make sense?
So does it provides jobs, or it provides the fact that we all need that basic education?
For education to begin with, the education system ensures that the basic knowledge, the ABC, 1, 2, 3, that's the needs. Our society says that we have a norm, everybody across the whole population on the macro scale, the norm in our society, the expected amount of knowledge for every citizen and resident is high school level.
So we do this for one. That's the need.
So the need is that the norm establishes the baseline for how much knowledge you're supposed to have. And since we need a systematic way to ensure that everybody gets that baseline knowledge, we, over time, in our culture, have established the education system. So the education system fills the need of the bare minimum amount of information because that's what the norm is. I feel like I need to choreograph an interpretive dance about do what? Yeah, something like that. Yes. Oh, okay. So Coco. Okay, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm glad that you mentioned if there was a confusing part. No, so Coco asked the question, I thought you were going in a functionalist kind of way. No, very good thing that you mentioned that, though, because, no, a functionalist would say about social institutions in general that they are in place because they keep society stable and orderly over time. But and they would say, okay, yes, the education system is the social institution that imparts knowledge on people or disseminates knowledge, whatever the word is, gives you knowledge, right? Past what TV can do and what your parents can do, okay? However, a conflict theorist, very different than functionalism, right? Very different than functionalism, but they're still macro level. A conflict theorist would look at the education system, and they might look at outcomes of the education system. Like, for instance, there is a big push in the education system now for females to go into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. What's the acronym for science, technology? STEM fields. There's a big push right now across the nation for females to go into the STEM field because, in the past, statistics show that males are the ones who are drawn to those fields. And economics-wise, the education system is tied to economics, right, and the job market. What jobs get the best salaries out there? What kind of job? Oh, STEM jobs. I thought I heard you say man jobs. I'm like, no. Oh, you did? No. So anyway, STEM jobs, which historically are male, right? Yeah. So a conflict theorist would harp on something like that. Well, a conflict theorist would say, okay, the education system, sure, it fills the need. We have a need because the norm says we're supposed to have a basic education level. So the education system fills up that basic education level. But let's look at the outcomes. If we've got a whole bunch of people who are becoming sociology majors, and we've got a whole bunch of people who are becoming computer scientists, and sociology majors make $30,000 a year, and computer scientists make, I don't know, $65,000 a year? And it's the guys being computer scientists and the gals being sociologists. Like, what is it in the norms for the education system, in the structure of the education system, what is it that's pushing females toward lower paying jobs and pushing males toward higher paying education fields? It might go up to the social facts like gender roles, right? So a conflict theorist would say, yeah, education system's a social institution. Yes, because it fills the norms for society. And yes, the need is that we have a basic, understood level of knowledge that we expect people in our population to have. But does it really treat everybody the same as we pass through it? Males and females, statistically, historically, males and females get very different outcomes in the education system. And so a conflict theorist would look at that. And then a symbolic interactionism, and a symbolic interactionist, a sociologist who uses symbolic interactionism, would take it down to the micro level, which is like one classroom over the next, maybe a fifth grade classroom. And how does the fifth grade teacher treat males differently than females, enforce rules differently with males than females, if we're looking at the gender role issue like you were talking about. So we can bring this down to the classroom level and see whether Ms. Fliss treats different students differently. Make sense? So I'm glad that you brought up the perspectives because, no, I shouldn't. And if you catch me, if you think that I'm like presenting information to you as factual, but I'm actually using one of the perspectives to do it, then you should stop me on that. Because the perspectives are going to be, different ways of looking at these different things. Huh? We're good? Okay. Okay, so questions, comments? ideas. Which is another thing a conflict theorist would say about the education system. Like, how often do teachers actually like let you have your own ideas, or how often do we want you to just like regurgitate somebody else's idea, right? Anyway, okay. So there are lots of examples of social institutions. Let me give you another example of one that is not maybe, I'm not sure if we had a little trouble understanding it or just that I wasn't explaining it well at first about how the education system is connected to filling a need because the norm is that we have a basic level of knowledge. How are we supposed to do it? What are the norms associated with getting that knowledge? Well, we don't have the family do it. We don't have Netflix do it. We have, so far, we have the education system do it. Okay? I'm not getting hot. Okay. So let me give you another one on your list of examples of social institutions. Okay, so, forgive me if this is too low for some of y'all to see it right here behind the podium. But look at what I'm doing here with the word family. I've got quotes around it, and I've got a capital F. Now, this is not something that you're going to see in sociology textbooks. This is something that I do. This is a weird Miss T thing that I do to keep it straight about that I'm talking about a macro scale thing. Family. If I put a lowercase f with no quotes around it, then I'm not emphasizing that it's macro scale concept. I'm just emphasizing your group of people you live with and my group of people that I live with on a micro scale. But when I do this, it's just a weird thing that Miss Terrell does about making sure that we understand that I'm talking about family from the macro scale. So air quotes and capital F when I spell that. Now, this one, to me, is a hard one for students to understand why I've got this word as a macro level component of social structure. Like, what's macro level about mom and dad, sister, brother?
What they're supposed to do.
It's zooming out. It's what they're supposed to do. Sort of the image of typical family, and I'm going to put the word typical in air quotes also, right? Because what the heck is that these days, right? So, but family, it's what they're supposed to do for the population of society overall. First of all, how is a population going to continue over time if we don't have people having babies? I mean, that seems like it's like, duh, people need to have babies so the population can continue, right? So there's a need, because people die. If people aren't replaced into the society at the same rate, at least at the same rate as people are dying, then over time, what happens to the population? Bye-bye. Bye-bye population. That's what happens over time. If you got people dying faster than people are being born. Okay, so there's a need. Okay, we have to have a population in the future. So we have to have people having babies. And it might sound funny to us because in the United States, we don't have trouble with people not having babies. We don't have trouble with that. Other cultures do. Other societies have trouble with people not having babies. Japan right now is one of them. South Korea is one of them.
Doesn't like China or something let you only have one kid?
The one-child policy in China is something that maybe many of you have heard about. Korea had a one-child policy for a while too. Do what?
I'm just now.
Okay, well, that's the government control over how many children you are or are not allowed to have because they're trying to control the population. So
They prefer boys.
yeah, it's a whole can of worms when we look at the motivation for the one-child policy and then the results of what happened with female infants as a result of that one child policy. So let me explain. Yeah, so you should look it up and
Well, no,
do some
I'm not confused. I'm just shocked.
intrigued intrigued by this, right?
This
Yeah,
is my
because
first time hearing
well,
about it.
because culture is different everywhere, right? So the norms are different everywhere.
I was gonna say that was dumb, but then I had to think about it.
It was their populate in China. The motivation was, and I'm really making this much. I'm condensing this into like a few quick sentences. But the motivation was the population was growing so quickly that there weren't resources to feed the population, there weren't resources to house the population, there weren't, and therefore the government stepped in and made a rule that you and I would think, well, that's against my human rights or something for you to only tell me that I can have one baby.
The cultural differences.
But the cultural differences, exactly. So anyway, so that was a mechanism to try to control the size of population. In the United States, we don't have trouble with people opting out of having babies. We have babies all the time. We love babies. Okay? We want to save babies all the time. So the Safe Haven Baby Box activity, we're like trying to save more and more babies, right? Okay, so we don't have a trouble with our population dying off, but some cultures do. As a matter of fact, 20 years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, I used to have exchange students from Austria, little tiny country in Europe. You know it from studying World War II. So I had some exchange students from Austria, and at that time, this is maybe 30 years ago, I can't remember, but at that time, young people, childbearing age people, were not having children. They were opting not to have children. And so sociologists, the government hired sociologists, go find out why these people aren't having babies, because the government that takes a census could see the population was going way down, way down. People did not want to make families on the micro scale, which meant that family on the macro scale did not exist with the same norms for baby making that they had before. And so the population was going down. Okay? So let me see if I remember this correctly. So they changed a whole bunch of laws in Austria to encourage people to have babies. They gave a huge stipend. I want to say it was like equivalent of $10,000 they would pay you if you would have a baby. They gave the woman, I'm trying to remember exactly, I'm sure I'm getting some of this wrong. It seems like they gave the mother a year of paid maternity leave and the father 6 months of paid paternity leave. And there was something else. I can't remember what else, but they were giving monetary incentives because the sociologists who started researching why aren't people having babies found out that basically the number one reason was money. Like, babies are expensive. And if I have a baby, I have less money to spend on myself. I have less time to spend on myself. Yeah. So that was the answer that most people gave when we asked. You know.
Did the population increase?
Yes, it did. The population absolutely increased after that. Yeah, so we are not talking about Austria being one of those countries where the population is declining anymore. Because for those kinds of reasons, and I don't think for any of you who are like planning on moving to Austria tomorrow, just for this, that was like a 30-year ago thing, and they're not doing it anymore. But yeah, family on that's what family on the macro scale does. One of the main things family on the macro scale does. Family is a social institution. Social institution fill needs that a society has. What greater need than making sure the population replenishes generation after generation? But here's another question. Do you think that's the only thing that family on the macro scale does for society? Having babies? What are we supposed to do with those babies once we have them?
Grow them into.
We're supposed to.
Society.
We are. Yes. Spoken like someone who doesn't have any children yet. But anyway, no, you're absolutely right. From the macro scale, that's exactly what a family is supposed to do: is to grow those children into adults of the future who are going to continue to have. Who are going to continue to follow the norms of society and participate productively in the economy. What did you say that made me giggle?
What? Make them work?
Yeah, make them work. Yeah, so the family is supposed to have babies, and then we're supposed to put them to work. Yes. So yes, the family also on the macro scale, the norms are we don't ship off every baby born in September 2019. We don't collect them from the hospital and ship them to a September 2019 house where all of them live until they're 18, and then we release them. That's not how it works. That could
Where did
that.
that happen?
That sounds like a dystopian movie. Yeah. See, it doesn't work that way. I mean, hey, there could be a social structure out there where that system might work and work perfectly. Is that our system? No. Our system is family, capital F with quotation marks. Family is the macro level social institution that not only replenishes the population, but since babies aren't born being capable of taking care of themselves or knowing anything, what does the family have to also do with the babies once they're here? Raise them up, take care of them till they can take care of themselves. Go through the socialization process and give them the ideas about the customs, the traditions, the rituals, the language, etc., that we share in our society from one generation to the next. Make sense? We understand what a social institution is and does. Okay, what time is it? 10:12. Okay, we have 30 minutes. Okay. So, questions about social institutions in general, or another example. I don't know how many examples your textbook author gives, but we can continue with this list. We can say that the government is a social institution. We can say what else? Y'all got the thing open. Religion is a social institution. The economy is a social institution. All of these things that we have discussed before. You have a question?
It says the emergent ones, mass media, is a social institution.
Yeah, mass media is going to include your social networks, your multiplayer video games, and everything. So how much reliance we have on that for disseminating information. Right? So for instance, does society have a need? So think of mass media as alerts. Think of our tornado sirens that go off that we test every Wednesday. Think of that even included in the mass media thing because we need to be alerted of things from time to time. Have any of you all ever had a boil order that you've had to follow? Y'all know like if a crew breaks into the water supply, and for a while you need to boil it in case there's something that got in there. So the government manages that kind of thing, but then gets the word out through mass media, right? So yes, sir.
What about like LGBT groups? What would that be considered as? Is that more a micro scale thing or micro?
Yeah, that would be a micro scale social groups that we're going to get to.
Would that be a social institution or would that be something? Okay.
Social groups, which is one of those other arms on that chart that we drew. Yeah, exactly. So okay, so yeah, we had government, we had religion, we had the economy. We've talked about the economy before as a social institution. I won't write it on the board, but let me just explain that. So the entire population, everybody in the population, we need a standard way of evaluating the cost or the value of things. So if you go buy a car at this car lot and it is a 2017 car with these kinds of tires and with a sunroof, and she goes and buys a car at this other car lot, the economy sets the norms, sets the rules that y'all are going to need to be paying pretty much equivalent. Like if she finds out that she's paid $3,000 or $4,000 more for her car than yours, that's a problem, right? So we have the economy gives us value of prices for things. The economy gives us rates of wages. The economy is linked to the education system because some of the fields that you're going to go into, like nursing or culinary arts or any of the other things that you're in, the education that you get is going to qualify you for jobs that you might want that have the salary. So all of those things are connected. Religion is one, all those other things that are listed on page. What page was it? 98. Questions? Okay. We're going to move to the central arm of that chart that we drew. But before I do that, and before somebody takes a picture of this for me, I want to kind of make an extension of this. Remember, I circled that central part of that chart that we made where those 3 lines come out from a central thing? Okay, so that circle where I circled that intersection is what I want to talk about right now. Because remember, social institutions, statuses and roles, and social groups, which are on the other 2 arms, these things are all connected to each other, that together make up social structure. So, this line represents, we're going from social institutions to the middle arm, statuses and roles. The education system gives us positions within the social structure. For instance, my position regarding the education system within the social structure is teacher. Teacher. Teacher is what I do on the micro scale, but are there norms on the macro scale that come from the education system that give you knowledge about the behaviors I am or I am not supposed to have in the classroom?
Yes.
Okay, I realized when I finished
can't
that
make
question
less
that was a really long, ugly question, but so sorry about that. But yeah, so the education system on the macro scale makes sure that the norms about the level of knowledge that everybody in the population is supposed to have, it makes sure that all those people get it. But also, it creates on the micro scale and macro scale, both, it creates norms about different positions that we're going to occupy. I occupy a position called teacher. What's the position regarding the education system that you occupy? Student. And there are norms for being a student. The norms exist on the macro level. You respond to them. I have some absences today. Is that a norm that's acceptable for a student?
No.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
sometimes it's okay. Like Amy texted me and said, I'm sick. I'm like, stay awake. Right? Permission to be absent. Right? But all the time absent, never letting anybody know, never making up work. Is that a norm?
No.
No. So we know the acceptable side of the norms. For those of you who watched my socialization video from last week, norms have an acceptable side of behavior and norms have an unacceptable side of behavior. So when I say absent all the time and never making up any work, you're like, that's not what a student is supposed to do. Where do you get that idea? You think if I was in Montana right now teaching a sociology class, they would have the same answer that you did? Yeah, about a student is supposed to attend as regularly as popular.
Montana, but is
Probably.
it different?
In Montana, it's still part of our society, our social structure. The education system still responds to the same norms on that macro scale. And so sure, the definition of appropriate behavior for a student versus inappropriate behavior for a student is the same for somebody in Texas or Missouri or Montana or California or anything like that.
Could
Yes, sir.
we expand on that definition for student and say that definition can be used for a student in a different country?
Yes, but the norms,
Be exactly
the norms
same,
are going to be different. Yeah, exactly.
But like,
If a student's like missing constantly, I think universally across like even from America to like South
In
Korea.
some,
it's like,
since this class seems to like a lot of like gender role topics, in some societies the word student means male.
What?
In some societies, students are only going to be male. Right. In the Middle East is famous for this. Also, all over Africa. Also, all over Africa. Also, Oprah Winfrey is famous for opening schools for women and women only. Yeah. Okay. So yes, your answer is there's going to be some commonality in the idea of what a student is supposed to do from one place to the next. But there's also going to be some differences, sometimes some major differences. Because when I said student before, did y'all picture a man or a woman? No, it's like, you look around. We got men, women, all shapes and sizes and colors in here, right? Other places, no. So if there is education, it's structured in a way that answers the needs of a population. Teachers and students are going to come from that. So family, what are some words, some positions that people can hold in families that come from this macro scale social institution? Parent, child,
animal.
goldfish. No, so parent, child, grandparent. We could have used words like brother, sister, mom, dad, right? Those are positions that exist in social structure that have norms associated with them. And those norms affect how we, on a micro scale, live them out in our daily life. Okay? And then each of the other social institutions that we can list, each of those other social institutions, we can, talk about these positions in society. Somebody take a picture of this for me, please. If you can get it from straight on, that would be good. Questions while Ian's doing that for us? We're good? Just don't forget to text it to me, please. Okay, so this is a transition. These arrows are a transition to the central line in our chart. What's the central line in our chart talking about? Statuses and roles. So now we need a big, do what?
I said this is going to be a fun one.
This is going to be the fun one? Well, it's connected to this. It's connected to social institutions. So we're going to be drawing it back to that every time we learn about statuses and roles. Okay. So you've heard me say, I don't know how many times now, that we have positions in society. That's a key word, a key term for the definition of the word status. Okay? So let's define statuses, and also let's define roles. You cannot have a status without a role that goes with it. So these have two separate definitions, but the definitions are linked, so we have to learn about them simultaneously. Okay, Coco, you with this? Okay. Okay, so statuses. These are positions people hold in society. Within the social structure, you could say. It's a position that you hold. Sometimes you hold a permanent position, sometimes your positions are temporary. Okay, so they can be temporary or permanent. So we said earlier that the position you hold in society regarding the social institution called the education system, the position you hold is what?
Student.
Is that a temporary position or a permanent position?
Temporary.
It better be temporary, right? Like the definition of the word student is that it's a temporary transitional thing for you, right? Temporary. Seems like it's like at your age right now, it seems like that's all you've ever been as a student, right?
Yeah.
But it will come to an end. It's supposed to come to an end, right? So the light is at the end of the tunnel, right? If you follow the norms that society has in place for student, because the norms for student are, or the norms include, that it's a temporary situation. You're supposed to get finished with all this stuff soon, okay? So sometimes statuses are temporary, sometimes statuses are permanent, but statuses are positions we hold in society. Where do those positions come from?
Societal standards.
What did we just get finished talking about? The other
Social institutions.
Social institutions. These positions, these statuses come out of the social institutions that we have that make up our social structure. Norms that are, norms that design the social institutions create these positions. So that's why these two things have elements of macro because you're not going to have a status that's not attached to that macro scale social institution stuff. But it also has a level of micro because we can talk about the expected or the unexpected behaviors of one particular student, right? So it's macro and micro. Okay, let's talk about roles because you can never have a status without a role that goes with it. Norms are the expected behaviors or duties. You could say duties associated with
Did you say
a
norm?
status. I could have said norms because what are norms?
Oh, okay. Alright.
Norms are behaviors. I'm not sure if I did say norms, but I do sometimes. Yeah, anytime I'm talking about behaviors, social behaviors,
Are you using norms and roles interchangeably?
no.
Okay.
But behaviors and norms I would use interchangeably.
Sometimes that you spelled behaviors when you said norms.
I did say norms?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh,
So norms are expected.
oh
That's
okay.
pretty talented.
Wow.
I can't say something or write something.
Okay, I don't know, because I mean, usually I'm misspelling everything. So anyway, okay, good. Well, I'm glad that I dazzle you with my spelling skills, because this will be the first and only time. So anyway, yes, roles are expected behaviors, and that's the definition of norms, really, from like the third video from week 4 that you're supposed to watch. So roles are expected behaviors or duties that go along with certain statuses. Okay? Student is the status we're harping on today. We can, and I'm not going to write them down, but let's talk about what are some of the duties associated with being a student. Studying.
Stressing yourself out.
Stressful studying. We are actually going to talk about the stress associated with these, because here's
Oh
the
no.
we actually are. I mean, that's part of this. That's part of the discussion of social behavior, right? And there's stress and pressure because we have expected behaviors. Are we always able to live up to social expectations? Oh no, we're not always able to live up to social expectations, but those expectations exist. So the role that goes along with the status of student would be attendance. It would be studying. Sometimes it's stressful. It would be taking tests that are due online tomorrow by 9 p.m. It is deadlines. Speaking of 9 p.m., meeting deadlines, right? Being on time, if we have staying the whole time, these kinds of things, right? Passing, right? The expectation is you're not going to take sociology 3 times, right? The expectation is we're going to take it to pass it, right? And everything else you're taking. Because is student temporary or permanent?
Temporary.
It's temporary. Got to be moving on, right? Okay, so the expected behaviors associated with the status of student, they're specific, right? They are specific. Let's talk about the status of mom. What are the duties that you would make a list of the duties on the macro scale, the norms on the macro scale, the expected behaviors that everybody everywhere would say a mom should do.
Okay. Yeah,
Should.
you answered it.
Should in air quotes, right? That's a good mom. That's a bad mom, right? How do we make those qualifications? We're responding to the macro scale norms that we know about that particular status, right? So what would you put on the list for mom?
Take care of the child.
What does that mean? Cook, dinner,
Clean
take
the house.
clean, laundry,
Wow.
bath time. Do what?
White booties.
White booties. we gotta say that one, right?
Please her husband. I say like
Oh,
massive
so
air
you
quotes.
assume a mom is married?
No.
Is married?
No.
No,
okay.
not at all.
Maybe but we used to, right? But there's a change over time, right? Some of us in this room, when I said mom, you might have thought the word husband, maybe, but not necessarily, right? Yeah. So any of those statuses or any of those positions that we get because family with a capital F and air quotes around it is a macro scale social institution. Those expected behaviors that go with those statuses, these exist on the macro scale because they are part of the structure of our norms in society. Does everybody fulfill those macro scale norms to?
Nope.
No. Students fail assignments and courses all the time. Mothers fall short and don't do what they need to do. And we have social safety nets to step in and like get the kids if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, right? So these norms exist on the macro scale. Norms are expected behaviors. Acceptable behaviors that are considered acceptable and appropriate. There's a flip side. If you know what is acceptable and appropriate, then it stands to reason that on the flip side, you know what's not acceptable and not appropriate when you see it. Right? So that norms has two sides. The roles are the acceptable side. I'm saying acceptable with a, like, acceptable, the understood behaviors or duties that you're going to do when you fill that position. Okay, so mom, again, to use that one, does the role of mom, once you're a mom, stay the same always?
No, depending on what you mean.
Okay, so you become a mom.
Okay.
The role, does your role change over time?
Yes.
Yes, because are you the mother of a 1-year-old or are you the mother of a 31-year-old, right? Mom might still be the status that you occupy, but given transitional periods of your life and the child's life, are the expected behaviors going to be different? Yes. Mom might still like for you to come over once every 6 months so she can cook your favorite meal when you're 31. But should you, as a 31-year-old child, expect her to do it regularly?
No.
Or your laundry, like you were saying,
That'd
right?
be a blessing.
You know, right. Not to us. So anyway, not to us, Preston. Okay, so anyway, statuses and roles are very complicated because we have to link this concept from, I think, the very first lecture, the very first week. We have to link this concept from the very first week to this idea here of what the expected behaviors are. Yeah, what time is it? Okay, yeah. So I can't tell you about it right now. Because it's complicated. But okay, so here's your homework. Do your test before we see each other again on Wednesday. And as a matter of fact, it's set. The test is set in Blackboard so that if you try to begin it after 9 p.m. tomorrow, it's not going to let you. If you begin it before, you've got all the time you need to, to post it. And if I'm wrong about that, I know you'll text me and let me know.
9 p.m. tomorrow.
I don't. That's what I was saying. I don't think it'll exit you out. I don't have it set to do that. If for some crazy reason, I thought you did yours already. Somebody in here did it. Okay. Yes.